Dorothy and Dick, Mr. and Mrs. Richard Kalmar, have been broadcasting a breakfast radio program here in New York for about 10 years. But both are well known beyond the boundaries of this city. Dorothy is Dorothy Kilgallen, veteran reporter, Broadway columnist for Hearst and other newspapers, a magazine author, a veteran inquisitor on What's My Line, and the mother of three. Dorothy, Dick was telling me when we were chatting this afternoon that a new portrait of you arrived at your home just yesterday. Is that right?
Yes, Ed. I'd like you to see it. It's a portrait by Robert Brackman, and he, of course, is the famous artist who did the portrait of Jenny for the movie of the same name. He did the portrait of Jennifer Jones, and here it is.
Oh, it's a grand piece of work. It's a very imposing setting, too. What room are we in now, Dorothy?
We are now in the drawing room, Ed. This is our Victorian drawing room, which we decided we'd have to sort of get away from it all. No television, no radio, nothing but candlelight, no electricity in this room. And the walls, I know you can't tell in black and white, are pale lavender pink, and the white curtains are lace and bridal satin. The love seat here is lavender satin that almost matches the wall.
Well, Dorothy, you've had quite a career since you started as a cub reporter. Did you always really want to follow in the footsteps of your father, Jim Kilgallen, certainly one of the best-known reporters in the country?
I think, Ed, that I probably did self-consciously because I always thought he was the most interesting father on the block.
That makes it 5 down and 5 to go, and I'm going to give you 1 more minute on this. You don't seem to be getting close.
Well, have you ever had anything published in newspapers?
Yes.
Oh, Dorothy. Do you know anyone named Carrie?
Very well.
Are you my father?
Yes!
He knew Thomas Edison and Jack Dempsey and John D. Rockefeller and famous actors and actresses, but I didn't consciously think of it until I got an opportunity when I was 17 to get a job, and then 2 weeks on the job, and I knew Dad really did have the most fascinating profession. We are now entering the dining room, which is ruby red and is also Victorian.
What's the largest crowd you ever had in that house, Dorothy?
I think we've seated 60 at dinner at little round tables, but this table opens up to seat 16 or 18 comfortably at a family dinner.
The idea for a black room come from, Dorothy?
We had friends who had a partly black room, and then we liked it so much we decided to be really risky and try going the whole hog and having one black, even the ceiling. But of course it does have white draperies and a bright green rug.
Well, what do you normally use it for?
This is really our living room. We use it for television, for playing records. The kids dance here. Dick dances with Jill. I dance with Dickie. And we have game parties here, and we have a collection of eagles, so we use that at parties. You can count 17 eagles in this room.
Dorothy, if you had to be confined to one job of the many that you do, which would it be?
Well, Ed, I love television. I have so much fun on What's My Line, playing the game, and I love our morning radio program, too. But I think that I would have to settle for my first love and my true love, the newspaper business. It still has me and always will, I think, I hope.
Well, looking back at this long career of yours in print, all the way from covering murder stories to racing around the world in airplanes, what do you consider your big story?
Well, it wasn't a scoop because everybody was there, but the story I loved most was the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II, which I covered from Westminster Abbey, and I loved it because it was so glamorous.
But Kilgallen was at heart a reporter, and she quickly found another side of Augusta that most boom towns seem to share: gambling. A lot of it. When her article came out in April 1953, Kilgallen described visit after visit to Augusta's many gambling establishments. This was sort of embarrassing because Mayor Hugh Hamilton had run for office the year before on a vow to get rid of it. After the article came out, Mayor Hamilton demanded an apology. The Richmond County Grand Jury vowed to get to the bottom of it too, dutifully announcing that it would do so on the Chronicle's front page. Well, you know what happened. Not much. The grand jury never seemed to get into investigating gambling, and Kilgallen herself had to rush off to England to cover the crowning of the new queen, Elizabeth II. Dorothy Kilgallen continued to maintain a high media profile and was known for having excellent sources within the Washington spy community, frequently offering scoops on Castro and the CIA. But it was the last years of her life that grew very, very interesting. A Hollywood insider, she knew President Kennedy and his girlfriends and hinted at liaisons with movie star Marilyn Monroe. After Kennedy's death in Dallas, Kilgallen went to Texas to cover the case. Jack Ruby, the bar owner who shot Lee Harvey Oswald on national TV, gave her private interviews. She told her friends that she was writing a book that would tell the story of who really killed Kennedy. That book was never written. In 1965, soon after returning from Dallas, Kilgallen was found dead in her home. She was sitting up in bed, reading a bestseller that her friends said she'd already read. She didn't have her reading glasses, without which she couldn't have read the book anyway. And her notes for all the interviews on Kennedy, they were never found. Initially, the story was she died of a heart attack. However, further tests indicated a curious alcohol drug overdose, some said similar to Marilyn Monroe's. Lewis Harris, by then the executive editor of the Chronicle, wrote a nice column about Dorothy Kilgallen for the paper.
From New York, let's meet our What's My Line panel. First, the popular columnist whose voice of Broadway appears in papers coast to coast, Miss Dorothy Kilgallen.
Thank you.
there are some stories that just won't ever go away, mostly because the threads always seem to be unraveling and new information is always arriving. Pearl Harbor, 9/11, and the Kennedy assassination are the most notable contemporary examples. My guest, author and investigative journalist Mark Shaw, has for years been looking at the events and people surrounding the JFK assassination. For him, like the story itself, the layers of the onion keep getting peeled away, only to reveal another translucent layer. In his new book, The Reporter Who Knew Too Much, he brings into bold relief the story of famed journalist and TV personality Dorothy Kilgallen. Mark Shaw is the author of over 20 books. He's a former legal analyst for USA Today and CNN. Mark Shaw, thanks so much for joining us. Well, for those that are a little younger than you and I, let's tell our listeners who Dorothy Kilgallen was.
And then an investigative reporter. Wow, she covered the most high-profile trials of the 20th century. The Lindbergh baby kidnapping case, the Lenny Bruce First Amendment case, the Dr. Sam Shepard case that became foundation for the Fugitive television series and then the movie with Harrison Ford, and, of course, the Jack Ruby case. And she did all that. She had a radio program in New York City with
I was able to, through I felt some guidance from Dorothy, find the daughter of Dorothy's butler, James Clement. That's who this man is. And my wife and I went to New York City, and we were able to interview Brenda DeJordan, the daughter, and boy, it just opened the floodgates. She could tell us about the parties at Dorothy's, at the Townhouse, and Sammy Davis Jr. and Jane Mansfield being there, and Jane Mansfield taking off her clothes, and her father having to help her put them back on. I mean, there are just some great stories that she could tell us. She could tell us about how her father took Dorothy's columns to the Journal American, all kinds of things. How the butler and his wife and the two children lived in the townhouse. So Barbara was a first-hand witness to what went on there. How they were permitted to sit at the dinner table with the other Kilgallen children, like part of the family. And then she gave us some really strong news. She said that Jill, Dorothy's daughter, had said to her father, "My mother was killed." We have another witness who said that Jill said that as well. That they all knew that Dorothy was working on the JFK assassination, that her father said, "Be careful, stay away from Jack Ruby. You shouldn't be involved in all that." But of course she wouldn't listen. So we learned a lot from Barbara DeJordan, as well as, you heard me say, that FBI agents swarmed Dorothy's townhouse the morning that she died and took all of her documents. That's from Barbara DeJordan, and she knows that happened. In the new book, people ask me all the time, were the deaths of Marilyn Monroe and Dorothy Kilgallen related? Well, as you may know, the circumstances with Kilgallen dying. In fact, we should go back, if we may, to when Mark Sinclair found Dorothy Kilgallen's body. If you'll bear with us just a minute, I need to be able to show you that video. If we could do that, I'd appreciate it. In the meantime, I'll talk about, if you would, Mark Sinclair 3. I'm sorry. Mark Sinclair is the one who found Dorothy Kilgallen's body. These are the sad, this is the sad chronicle of that.
Did she tell you what her plans were for later that night? After What's My Line?
She was going home afterwards. But obviously she didn't, because she went to the Regency.
Do you suspect that she got a phone call after you left?
After I left, I think she got a phone call from somebody, and she agreed to meet whoever it was at the Regency. That's my belief, because she wasn't going to Clark's. She had asked me if I wanted to meet her because she did not have anybody she was going to meet with. And she was not dressing for a date.
Well, she did end up going to Clark's briefly with Bob Bach.
Well, maybe, but not long. But she might have done that and then gone home, but there wouldn't have been an evening like she had.
Why didn't you accept her offer to go with her somewhere?
I was tired myself. She had done something every day that week, and she had more appointments for me the following week. And I didn't want to see anymore. I wanted to go home.
Did she tell you that she had a meeting at her son's school?
Yes, on that was Sunday. I did her hair before the show, and she told me to come the next morning before 9. I arrived at the house at 9, used my key, I think it was about 8:30, 8:45, used my key, let myself in, went upstairs, and Dorothy was dead in her bedroom.
You went to the third floor bedroom that she did not sleep in that room.
She did not sleep in that room, and when I entered, Dorothy was, she was not in that room, but the air conditioning was on, it was cold out, that's the room.
What about that air conditioning vent? Was that?
No, that's the dressing room. Oh no, that's a heater, that's not an air conditioner. This is the air conditioner.
Oh, that's it, where it would have been in that position.
Right in that same position. And it was blowing out in that room. And I was here. And the light was on, and she wasn't there. So I turned on my curling irons, and I walked into the bedroom, not thinking that she would be there. And she was sitting up in bed, and I walked over to the bed and touched her, and I knew she was dead right away.
And how was the bed made up?
The bed was spotless. She was dressed very peculiarly. She was dressed like I've never seen her before. She always dressed in pajamas and old socks, and her makeup was off, and her hair was off, and everything was done. She was completely dressed like she was going out. The hair was in place, the makeup was on, the false eyelashes were on, the matching peignoir and robe, book laid out on the bed, a drink on the table, the light was on, the air conditioning was on. Though you didn't need an air conditioner, you would have had the heat on. And she was always cold. And why she had the air conditioning on, no, I don't know.
Possibly someone else had turned it on.
Well, maybe to keep the body at a certain temperature, you know.
Was the glass on the bedside table within her reach?
It was on the right-hand side, no, it was way away, way over. And the book, it was turned upside down. It wasn't in the right position for if you'd been reading, laid it down. And it was laid down so perfectly, you know, like that. And one hand, rigor mortis had set in on one hand, the right hand, and it had drawn up the covers a little bit. And there was lipstick on this sleeve of the bolero jacket. And the light was on, and she was sitting up.
It's even better that we brought it up right here because I want to talk about Marilyn's death as well. But you heard him say, eyelashes, makeup, hairpiece on, clothes she never wore to bed, not in the bedroom she ever slept in, book upside down, no reading glasses, no nothing. Does that sound like a staged death scene to you? No investigation. Despite that, they took one look at an empty Seconal bottle and decided, for whatever reason, the ME office at that time was controlled by the mafia, by the way, that's in both books. Close the case up, be done with it. That's what they did, no investigation. So that turns me to Marilyn and Dorothy's death. No investigation of Dorothy's, Marilyn's barely an investigation. I will tell you right now, and one of the things I'm working on if I write a third book is this. The Marilyn Monroe's death was a dress rehearsal for how they killed Dorothy. A lot of similarities there. Drug overdose, found in a bedroom, all these other kind of things. That's something I'm going to investigate as I go along.